The invention of printing, which took place in China at least as early as the 7th or 8th century Christian era, enabled men to produce a number of copies from an original script. The earliest kinds of printing technology evolved in China, Japan, and Korea. In such systems of hand printing, wooden blocks were carved with the reverse image raised in relief of the text or illustration to be reproduced. The blocks were inked and paper pressed onto them. Movable blocks or type, each carved with one individual character, were introduced in China in the 11th century. They allowed any combination of characters to be put together and then taken apart for reuse. This technique laid the foundations of mechanical printing processes. In this chapter, we will study the following concepts: the history of print in Europe, relationship between print culture, debate and politics, and the growth of press in 19th century in India. The history of Europe. In the 11th century, Chinese paper also reached Europe via the Silk Route. Paper made it easier for Europeans to produce beautifully crafted manuscripts. In fact, it was only after the great Venetian explorer Marco Polo returned to Italy in 1295, carrying with him basic knowledge about printing, that the Chinese system of printing entered Europe. The Italians began their own printing by copying the technique imported from China. Gradually, the technology spread to many European countries. Printing with wooden blocks gradually gained popularity in European countries. Aristocratic class. The aristocratic class did not favor books using this technology. They had the money to buy the luxurious, expensively bound and elaborated, illuminated, decorated with intricate lettering, designs and pictures, handwritten editions that were normally produced by monasteries. On the other hand, students and merchants began to demand cheaper printed books, which were often more meaningful to them in terms of low price and more useful and focused content. Promotion of readership. To promote readership, book fairs were organized at different places, and these spurred the overall demand. They also gave booksellers the opportunity to export books to foreign buyers. Scribes were employed by wealthy patrons to produce scripts that suited the patron's taste. In spite of all these steps, the trickle of handwritten materials failed to quench the thirst of the masses. By the middle of the 15th century, wooden blocks were being widely used in Europe to print textiles, playing cards, and religious pictures with simple and comprehensive text. Gutenberg and the printing press. Johannes Gutenberg, a German from the town of Mainz, pioneered the technique of printing with movable type, that is, individual letters, numbers or symbols cast from metal, in mid-15th century. Gutenberg was the son of a merchant and grew up on a large agricultural estate. Inspired by the design and construction of olive and wine presses, Gutenberg adapted extant technology to develop a printing machine. The first book he printed was the Bible. It took him 3 years to produce the approximately 180 copies that were printed. Gutenberg's printing press. By the end of the 15th century, hundreds of book titles were being produced each year on wooden presses, much like Gutenberg's. The rapid spread of knowledge made possible by Gutenberg's printing press contributed to the Renaissance, the Scientific Revolution, and the Protestant Reformation. For this reason, Gutenberg was chosen by the Time magazine as the man of the millennium. Typecasting. Until the 19th century, metal type had to be cast by hand. each piece of type representing a letter, symbol, etc. had to be individually set by hand in order to compose words. Both were slow and time-consuming tasks. David Bruce introduced mechanized typecasting in 1838. Printing during 1450 to 1550. During the period 1450 to 1550, many printing presses were established in different countries of Europe. With the rise in the number of presses, book production also increased by leaps and bounds. Thus, in the 15th and 16th centuries, the European market was flooded with books. The introduction of mechanical printing led to the print revolution that transformed Europe and finally spread all over the world. The print revolution and its impact. The revolution in printing brought about deep and long-lasting changes in the social and cultural landscape. It must have had a life-transforming effect on the people who lived in the centuries following the invention of the printing press. By transforming the basic concepts around which his life revolved, the printing revolution had a tremendous impact on man's attitudes towards religion, liberty, happiness, etc.